I'm going to get the track Rotary up right now, where we're going to be taking a look at the vocals. There's currently 3 vocal tracks. There's the lead vocal, there's the supporting vocal to the lead, which is like an overdub, sorry. And then there is the backing vocal. Now, the reason I've done an overdub of the vocal is to make it sound stronger. This is a technique that George Martin used to tell like the likes of like John Lennon and stuff, and became a very popular technique. Because it allows the vocals to match up together. If you balance the vocals right, then a lot of the time when it's within the mix, you won't even realise that it's been like doubled over. And if there was any weak moments in either the first vocal or the second vocal, the opposite kind of like picks up the bass, and it does it like vice versa throughout. But before we get into that, we're gonna have a listen to the first vocal, and then I'm gonna add in the backing one, and then the actual backing vocal as well. So let's begin. This is what it sounds like completely dry.
And as the day begins to break into a new one, I'm sure it's fine.
So pretty good take, pretty strong. I used a pop filter to remove any like plosives and like sibilants and stuff, or to reduce it, I should probably say. I recorded this with a Unidyne mic. The main issue with the Unidyne is it's not very like bottom end heavy, with it being a harmonica mic. So we'll move on to the EQ now, where we'll take a look at this. I was quite happy with the bottom end, as you can see here. I haven't really made any adjustments. All I've done is I've added a roll off past 100 Hz with a high pass, and then I've boosted with a shelving filter at around 8 kilohertz by about 4 dB. This is to add like clarity into the vocal. And then as well as this, I've pulled it down a tiny bit at 7 kilohertz, with that 6 to 8 range being a bit harsh, with it being like the sibilance range. So I've pulled it down slightly just to avoid that a little bit and like soften it up. I have then got a second EQ here, where I've further emphasised that. So I wasn't happy with this sibilance. So at 8 kilohertz, I've made a small pin drop drag down by about 5 dB. Again, just attacking that sibilance and them nasty sounds that you don't really want. So let's have a listen now.
And as the day begins to break into a new one, I'm sure it's fine.
So like nothing like huge like change in there, but enough to like stop any undesirable, unpleasant sounds from being like caught up in the mix. Especially when we then add the compressor, which is where we're on to now. For my compressor, I've got my attack really slow. My release is quite high, and I'm not compressing it that much. If anything, I've drove the output more than I've drove the input, just to like touch the compressor on and to bring some more like volume to the vocal. So let's have a listen now.
And as the day begins to break into a new one, I'm sure it's fine.
And then next up from there, my usual, I've used the saturator. This one isn't driven whatsoever, because I wanted to keep the vocal nice and clean, but I just like the sound of the saturator doing its thing. So the main thing I've done is I've adjusted the cal here, and I've moved the bias down slightly. And then from here, we've got our lead vocal send. And for that, I've used the Valhalla frequency echo. This is a free plugin that I got online. It's used mainly for its cool like shift. It sets the amount of frequency shifting in hertz. Basically, like when the delay starts, it'll like shift the frequency of it, creating like a cool weird sound effect. But I've not used it for that today. I've just used it as an 1/8 note delay. I've put it around 50%, and the delay is by 13.4 milliseconds. So it's got a bit of a pre-delay on it. I don't know, I just really like the sound of this frequency echo, and like it's just a nice change in comparison to stuff I've used on the other tracks. So let's have a listen to that.
Ooh, in a good way, not bad this time.
It's got like a dotted tape echo kind of sound, which I'm quite favourable of, which I've got on my pedal board as well. I'm quite liking the sound of that on vocals as well. But as well as that, just to give it a bit more like natural feel, rather than a really dry sound, I've added the short room, which we've spoke about in previous videos. The short room I've used on the guitars, on the drums. It's kind of like the reverb I use for everything to kind of like glue everything together. So let's have a listen now that I've got that in. One moment.
And as the day begins to break into a new one, I'm sure it's fine.
So it's sounding a lot more clearer now. It's got loads of like holes and sustain, and I was very, very happy with it. There wasn't really loads that I needed to do. So now moving on to the guide vocal, not the guide, the extra vocal that I've done. For this, when you're overdubbing, you don't want to apply the same effects as you would on the main vocal. So something that I like to do, rather than going all out and like trying to create something that sounds completely different, I've just used a Pro limiter to bring the level of the vocal up and keep it consistent. Because if you go and do loads of wacky stuff, or you put all the same stuff on as you would the main vocal, you're kind of just replicating what you've already done, and they end up fighting for like the main position, even when like balancing the volume. So in just putting a Pro limiter on, you keep the vocal nice and dry, nice and clear. You don't want any delay on or any like reverb or anything like that. You just want it for pure support. It's like the foundation to your main vocal. So I'm gonna show you the settings, and then I'm gonna slowly pull it in and show like what it's doing. So as you can see, the threshold is very, very low, because obviously I'm not compressing it. I'm just using a limiter by -12 dB. I have put a little bit of a ceiling on it by -0.3, because I didn't want to run the risk of like peaking if it ever gets to a point like that. And this should bring the vocals up to like a consistent, clear level. So if we have a listen now, this is where it's at currently.
And as the day begins to break into a new one, I'm sure it's fine.
Now it's like I've spent time like trying to get it right and balancing it, but like you can play about with it, and a good way like to get ready like to find where you want it in the mix is to pull it down
and as the day
and just reintroduce it slowly.
to break into a new one, I'm sure it's fine.
By doing this, you can find where you want
It
it.
makes me think of you in a good way, not bad this time.
Now, obviously, in doing this, you run the risk of phase, because like you're never going to be perfectly in time. It's not like a duplicate or a copy. It's going to be slightly out, so it might have a bit of a chorusy, phasery sound to it. Ways around this you can do is obviously, like I've mentioned, don't repeat the chain. Just have it nice and clear, nice and dry. You could also potentially flip the phase and invert it. There's lots of little neat tricks. Some people like to pan one left and pan one right, but that's kind of like a different technique that I was going for. I just wanted the doubling up for this and get it sounding natural. So yeah, that's it for that. Now finally we've got the final vocal, which is the backing. This is a very like similar one to the one I did on Outsiders. Like this is long-winded, like reverberant singing part. So let's have a listen here. It might be a bit quiet. For this take, I stood further away from the mic, and then just increased the gain of the interface slightly. This is because I wanted it to have more like distance between me and the mic, getting a bit more of the room, which I'll further emphasize with obviously some plugins reverb. So as you can obviously hear, it's very, very quiet. So the first step was by adding a compressor, just to save time, because I know I like the sound of it. I have used the lead vocal preset on the Pro compressor, and I've really smashed the makeup gain because the level just wasn't loud enough. And I quite like the sound of this compressor. So let's have a listen now. You can really hear like the gap between me and the microphone on this one. And it just shows that like doing something slightly different can have like a completely different tonality and timbre to what you're doing, which can obviously be then beneficial. You don't want to just be repeating the same things over and over again. Then after that, I've used the saturator. I always find good with backing vocals is to like really saturate it a little bit. So this is just below the halfway mark. It just adds a bit of like character and a bit more life to it. And obviously, if you're doing backing vocals, it's normally harmonies. So what's better than putting harmonics on then on your voice for those harmonies? So let's have a listen now. So yeah, it's a bit dry and it does need a bit more reverb. So with that, we're going to add a lot more reverb. So I've used the guitar reverb for this one because the guitar reverb's a lot longer. My same techniques before. I've got a reverb on the left and a reverb on the right because I've got guitars that go on the left and guitars that go on the right. So this vocal's panned to the left. So I've then put the guitar reverb from the right on it. And as well as this, I've used the lead vocal with the Valhalla frequency echo. I've really pushed it in comparison to the lead vocal because I really want it to shine through because I really like the sound of this new plugin that I have found. It just, as well as giving it space and like a room, I just love the like the tape echo, like dottedness of it. So let's have a listen now. So you can hear there, like when I sung that little bit and I got louder, you can hear like the saturator coming in, and it just works really well. On its own, it's like pushing, like it almost replicates the sound of analog equipment being pushed, which is always good because we always want to go for that beautiful analog sound. So yeah, let's listen at a different point in the song, and we'll listen to the other vocals as well. Let's have a look.
Why should we fall asleep if nothing ever comes? And as the day begins to break into a new one, I'm sure it's fine. It makes me think of you in a good way, not bad this time.
So yeah, that's how I did the vocals for Rotary. Thank you.